Hi, this is Abhishek Sharma, and I'm presenting the beta version of the Capstone project. I belong to the group called Secure 11, and along with my teammates Vikraman, Johit, Sukhvinder, and Jaspreet, I have worked on the internal and external vulnerability assessment and penetration testing of the network of the UNO agency. To talk about the client, UNO agency is one of the top recruitment agencies that conducts hiring locally as well as internationally. Therefore, they have to abide by the various international laws pertaining to the protection of personal identifiable information and financial data of their clients. Based on the project scope, we have separated the tasks under the four categories for the ease of achievement. So, the presented roadmap shows each stage that we have to achieve, which will lead us to initiate the next level. As an initial step of this project, we are required to build the real world organizational environment by implementing the machines and the networks. For that, we have created the network diagram at stage 1. According to the diagram, we have implemented the VMs and configured the network, conducted the vulnerability assessment, and provided appropriate mitigations and final delivery of the project with bearing. In this slide, we can see the task summary based on 4 levels. Each task has been assigned to a particular goal which is mentioned in the left side. As we have mentioned earlier, it starts with creating a network diagram, selecting the suitable resources such as virtual machines and firewalls, collecting those resources, developing the network infrastructure. In the second phase, implementing those resources which we have considered as virtual machines, configuring the Active Directory, DNS, and DHCP, along with connecting under the same domain, and enabling firewall and routing configurations. In the third phase, conducting the internal and external vulnerability assessment. Here, we consider the internal assessment for all the host machines that are connected under the same network and external vulnerability assessment for the web application which can even be accessed from the external parties. Apart from these, we are going to conduct the firewall security review based on the policy and rules that we are going to implement in that to enable connection between machines to communicate within the network. Once the vulnerabilities are identified, we are going to conduct an analytical part by verifying the identified vulnerabilities on the targets. Once we have identified and verified the vulnerabilities, we are going to prepare a log report which contains the target details, vulnerability description, impact, and mitigation. As a final deliverable, we are going to prepare an executive report based on the findings which we have to deliver to the customer. In the final phase, we are going to ensure and finalize the logs and generate the final report with the evidence for submission to the client.
In this diagram, we can see the router and firewall is centralized between the components and connected with systems. This is the network diagram that we have created to develop the organizational environment. Implementation of the virtual machines based on the diagram include these resources. In this screenshot, you can see that we have configured internal host machines such as Kali, Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows 10, and Windows Server 2016. As an external machine, which is Secure 11 system, is used to conduct testing from outside the network. On the other hand, we have implemented a vulnerable web server with a vulnerable website hosted by the organization as well. For the firewall, we have used Fortinet cloud-based firewall, which gave us a 30-day free trial. Unfortunately, it's expired now, and we are planning to re-implement that with a new trial license. Once the machines and networks are configured, we can see the assigned IP address of each system. Here we can see the Windows Server 2016 with Active Directory, DHCP, and DNS, which is assigned with a 20.10 IP address, and the Kali internal host with a 20.5 IP address. Now let's have a look at the rest of the machines. In this slide, we can see the Windows 10 machine and the Windows 7 machine that is hosted on the network. Finally, we can see the XP machine here, which is also connected with network. On the other hand, we can see the Kali machine, which is in a different IP range. Here we can see our vulnerable web server, which is known as bweb, that is up and running with the vulnerable website. This website is configured with a locally assigned domain, agency.com in our case, and this is done in the host file in the system. Here in this slide, we can see the domain controller in the Active Directory, which is a member of agency.local.
At this point, we must connect the internal Kali Linux machine to the Windows domain. We have completed this domain configuration and we are able to integrate the Kali Linux system to the Active Directory domain. For the reference, we have created a tutorial video of the complete configuration that can be checked on the link here. As I mentioned earlier, all the integrated systems are connected to the domain, and in the screenshots we can see the computers that are under the local domain. In this slide, we can see the users under the domain who are assigned to the system. Since we have implemented the FortiGate firewall, we have configured the firewall policy and rules to the LAN and WAN networks to communicate. Here, we can see the network interfaces from the firewall that are up and running.
Once all the configurations were set, we started the vulnerability assessment on the web application, which were hosted on the vulnerable web server. And we have identified plenty of vulnerabilities which are of high risk to this organization as well. This assessment has been conducted by using several tools such as Nessus, Acundix, NetSpark, and Nmap. In the mentioned link, we prepared the vulnerability logs with identified path, description, risk level, impact, and mitigation. At this point, we are going to conduct the vulnerability assessment on internal machines to assess the system or host security. Here we have identified various vulnerabilities that may compromise or damage the entire organization. In the mentioned link, we prepare the vulnerability logs with the identified path, description, risk level, impact, and mitigation.
As a last assessment, we have conducted the firewall security review by analyzing the firewall configuration file by using the Nipper tool. Through this analysis, we have identified the vulnerabilities which are reported in the mentioned link. So far, we have completed most of the major tasks and achieved the learning outcomes with these real world scenarios. Here we can see the project progress from the Microsoft Planner. At this point, you can see the completion summary so far, and the future tasks have been highlighted in the yellow block. Thank you for listening to this presentation.